Today we delve into a tragic murder that happened on what was supposed to be a joyful wedding day. The celebration took a shocking turn when the groom publicly revealed his bride's transgender identity in front of all their guests. What followed was a deadly confrontation, with the truth unraveling in ways no one could have imagined. Brandon Whitmore, 32, was an up-and-coming assistant professor of political science at Ohio State University. He was known for being confident and charismatic, both in the classroom and at social events. However, despite his professional success, his personal life had always been more complex. Brandon had a tendency to act on impulse, often losing his temper and ignoring red flags in relationships. In early 2015, he crossed paths with Melissa Stanislav, a 28-year-old high school girls basketball coach from Columbus, Ohio. Their meeting felt like destiny, a random encounter at a local charity event where Melissa was coaching a team of young girls from underprivileged communities. Brandon was instantly captivated by her grace and composure, sparking a conversation that quickly blossomed into a whirlwind romance. They quickly connected over shared interests in sports, fitness, and education, and before long, they were planning a wedding. However, despite the deep emotional bond they had formed, there were early warning signs. Their relationship, though passionate, wasn't free from tension and unresolved issues. Melissa was guarded about certain aspects of her life, particularly her past. Brandon's friends began to notice her reluctance to share personal details, especially when it came to her upbringing. She was adamant about not showing Brandon any childhood photos, which raised questions but was never fully addressed. Brandon, however, ignored these red flags. He was deeply invested in the idea of building a future with Melissa and was captivated by her beauty and charm. Despite friends and family expressing doubts about her secrecy, particularly about her childhood, Brandon brushed off their concerns. He believed that love would be enough to bridge any gaps in their relationship. The couple set their sights on a grand wedding for late June 2015 at the historic church in downtown Columbus. Guests from across Ohio, including many of Brandon's colleagues from Ohio State, were invited, and everything seemed to be coming together for a beautiful, traditional ceremony. However, the secrets Melissa had kept hidden for so long began to surface, leading to an unraveling of events in the most public and devastating way imaginable. What should have been the happiest day of their lives quickly turned into a nightmare. On the afternoon of June 27, 2015, at around 3:30 p.m., Brandon Whitmore's body was discovered in the men's restroom of the Trinity Episcopal Church in downtown Columbus, Ohio. Just hours earlier, the church had been the venue for Brandon and Melissa's wedding ceremony. What began as a celebration of love and commitment ended in a tragic, unexpected death. The reception was still lively, filled with laughter and chatter, when groomsman Greg Langston noticed that Brandon had been absent for an unusually long time, over 3 hours. Growing concerned, Greg set out to find him and approached the locked bathroom door. After knocking and calling out to Brandon without receiving a response, his anxiety heightened. In a moment of urgency, he forced the door open. Inside, Greg was met with a horrifying sight. Brandon's lifeless body slumped against the toilet stall, his pants around his ankles. Multiple gunshot wounds marred his torso and groin, and blood splattered across the bathroom floor and walls. Greg, reeling from the shock, stumbled backward and shouted for help. Panic swept through the wedding reception as guests rushed to the scene. He quickly dialed 911, his voice trembling as he reported the horrific discovery. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but their efforts were in vain. Brandon was declared dead at the scene. Greg, though visibly shaken, managed to stay composed while relaying the grim details to the first responders. The chaotic atmosphere of the wedding reception quickly transformed into one of disbelief and horror as guests learned of the shocking news. What should have been a joyful celebration had turned into a scene of tragedy, setting off a chain of events that would reveal deep-seated secrets and alter the lives of everyone involved. The bathroom quickly became a crime scene, sealed off as the shocking reality settled over the wedding guests, still clad in their formal attire. The joyful celebration had devolved into a tragic nightmare, leaving everyone in disbelief. Columbus police officers arrived shortly after, their presence adding to the tense atmosphere. Initial reactions varied from shock to confusion as guests struggled to comprehend what had just occurred. Whispers of disbelief circulated, and the joyful chatter of the reception was replaced by an eerie silence, punctuated only by the distant sounds of sirens and the unfolding investigation. Melissa, who had not been seen for a while, quickly became the focal point of the investigation as authorities worked to piece together the chaotic and violent events that had just transpired. Columbus police responded swiftly to the 911 call, with Detective Ray Mathis, a seasoned investigator known for his careful and thorough methods, taking charge of the case. He began to assess the scene, gathering evidence and interviewing witnesses, while trying to make sense of the horrifying incident that had shattered what should have been a joyful occasion. Mathis and his team secured the crime scene, meticulously examining the bathroom where Brandon Whitmore was discovered. Blood spattered across the walls and floor painted a grim picture, while the positioning of Brandon's body with his pants down and multiple gunshot wounds to his chest and groin suggested that a violent struggle had occurred. The detective noted every detail, aware that each piece of evidence would be crucial in understanding the events leading up to this tragic moment. Brandon had also suffered defensive wounds on his arms, indicating he had fought back against his attacker. Investigators later found the murder weapon, a small handgun, discarded in a trash can just outside the church. It appeared to have been hastily thrown away and wiped clean of fingerprints, raising suspicions about the assailant's intent to hide their identity. Detectives quickly began interviewing the guests, aiming to piece together the events leading up to the murder. What they uncovered was shocking. Witnesses described a chaotic scene during the wedding reception that had occurred shortly before Brandon's death. Guests reported loud arguments, strange behavior from Melissa, and a growing tension that seemed to escalate throughout the evening. Some guests noted that Brandon had appeared increasingly agitated, while others recalled Melissa leaving the room abruptly just before he went missing. According to multiple accounts, Brandon made a sudden and shocking outburst in front of the wedding guests. Shortly after the ceremony, during the reception toast, he stood up and began shouting, "My bride's a guy," repeatedly while pointing at Melissa. He went on to reveal that Melissa was a transgender woman and still had male genitalia, leaving the entire room in stunned silence. The atmosphere shifted dramatically as guests processed the unexpected revelation, with some expressing disbelief while others were visibly uncomfortable. The guests were horrified as Brandon continued his public tirade, angrily denouncing Melissa for keeping her trans identity hidden from him. Witnesses described how Melissa ran out of the reception hall in tears, humiliated and devastated by Brandon's cruel revelation. The wedding party was thrown into chaos, with guests unsure how to respond to the shocking information. Some attempted to console Melissa as she fled, while others stood frozen in disbelief, grappling with the unexpected and painful truth that had been exposed. The joyous occasion quickly transformed into a scene of confusion and distress. Some guests tried to console Brandon, while others hurried after Melissa. His outburst provided a clear motive: humiliation, betrayal, and anger. The police quickly shifted their focus to Melissa, who had vanished from the church after the incident. Detective Mathis and his team began searching for her, recognizing she was the last person seen with Brandon before his death. As the investigation progressed, the police concentrated on gathering more details about the couple's relationship, the wedding itself, and the explosive confrontation that had led to such a deadly conclusion. Melissa Whitmore Stanislav, 28, became the prime suspect almost immediately following Brandon's death. Melissa had fled the wedding reception after Brandon's shocking public outburst, leaving a devastated crowd in her wake. Friends and family described her as usually poised and elegant, but in the months leading up to the wedding, she had become increasingly stressed. The weight of hiding a significant part of her identity from Brandon, that she was transgender, had taken a toll on her. Born Nell Stanislav, Melissa had recognized her true identity as a transgender woman during her teenage years, but she had never shared this with Brandon. She feared that revealing the truth would lead to rejection and destroy the future she had envisioned for herself. Throughout their fast-paced romance, Melissa managed to keep her past hidden, worried that it would unravel everything she'd worked for. As the wedding day approached, the tension in their relationship grew. Melissa's cautious approach to physical intimacy had always raised questions, but she continued to insist that waiting until marriage was important to her. Brandon, though increasingly frustrated, went along with her wishes, hoping their wedding would mark a turning point. However, the pressure of keeping her secret weighed heavily on Melissa, and in the days leading up to the ceremony, the fragile balance she had maintained began to crumble. This shocking discovery sent Brandon into a state of disbelief and rage. Investigators later learned that he confronted Melissa immediately, demanding to know why she had hidden her true identity from him. The argument that followed was intense and emotional, with Melissa pleading for understanding and forgiveness, while Brandon struggled to process what he had just uncovered. Despite their heated exchange, the couple decided to go ahead with the wedding, although it was clear that trust between them had been shattered. Though Brandon appeared to calm down, the tension between him and Melissa lingered beneath the surface. Friends and family noticed his unusual behavior in the days leading up to the wedding, but no one could have predicted the explosive events that would follow. On the day of the wedding, Brandon's inner turmoil finally erupted in a public outburst that humiliated Melissa in front of everyone. Despite their outward reconciliation, Brandon had clearly not moved past the betrayal he felt. What should have been a joyous celebration of love quickly turned into a tragic confrontation, culminating in the shocking murder that left both families devastated. Despite Melissa's deep love for Brandon, her fear of rejection and financial constraints kept her from being fully open about her identity. She had long dreamed of undergoing gender reassignment surgery, but her job as a high school girls' basketball coach barely covered her living expenses. The cost of the procedure seemed out of reach, and she worried that if her trans identity became public, she could lose everything: her job, her community, and most importantly, Brandon. As the wedding day approached, Melissa felt the pressure mounting. The secret she had carried for so long was becoming harder to keep, but she still hoped that her love for Brandon would be enough to weather any storm. Unfortunately, Brandon's discovery of the truth unraveled the fragile bond they had built, leading to the devastating events that would shock everyone who knew them. Melissa was constantly anxious that her secret could cost her everything. If the school discovered the truth, she feared losing her job, which would shatter her future plans. In 2015, while awareness of trans rights was growing, discrimination remained rampant, especially in conservative areas like the one where Melissa lived and worked. Brandon's accidental discovery placed Melissa in a difficult position, one that quickly spiraled out of control. When questioned by police, Melissa remained calm, but was clearly distressed. Her eyes revealed her nervousness as they flickered around the room, yet she maintained her composure, speaking softly and politely throughout the interrogation. Melissa adamantly denied killing Brandon, but confessed that she had been afraid of what he might do following his explosive outburst at the reception. During her interview with the police, Melissa admitted her fears, explaining Brandon wasn't the kind of person to just let things go. "I was scared he'd ruin my life," Melissa continued. "I could lose my job. Everything I worked for would be gone." As a girls' basketball coach at a local high school, Melissa understood that revealing her trans identity could lead to losing her job. The financial and emotional fallout would be overwhelming, especially since she couldn't afford the gender reassignment surgery needed to align her body with her true self. Despite these fears, Melissa maintained her innocence regarding Brandon's murder. "I didn't kill him. I would never do that," she said, her voice trembling as the reality of the situation began to sink in. The police observed her distress but remained doubtful as the investigation progressed. Gina Stanislav, 54, Melissa's mother, was the next person the police approached during their investigation. Originally from San Francisco, Gina was a sharp-tongued woman known for her unconventional lifestyle and strong opinions. As a tenured professor of Tibetan Buddhism at Ohio State University, she was no stranger to challenging societal norms. During the detectives' interview, they quickly discovered that Gina, much like her daughter, had a complex relationship with identity and gender norms. She candidly admitted to investigators that she enjoyed dressing as a man and visiting gay bars, where she would engage in sexual encounters with gay men, even while married. To her, it was a form of self-expression, stating to the police, "I like to challenge gender binaries." "It's liberating," she said, her honesty catching the investigators off guard. Despite her candid views on gender and sexuality, Gina was fiercely protective of her daughter, Melissa. Gina acknowledged her role in keeping Melissa's transgender identity a secret from Brandon, believing that revealing the truth could jeopardize her daughter's future. "I advised her not to tell him," she confided to the investigators. The consequences could be devastating, not just with Brandon, but also with her job as a girls' basketball coach. "The world isn't kind to people like Melissa, and I didn't want her to lose everything." During her interrogation, Gina remained defiant, firmly rejecting any implication that she had a role in Brandon's murder. "I would never hurt anyone," she asserted, her voice escalating with emotion. "What happened at that wedding was between my daughter and her husband." "I had nothing to do with it," Gina insisted. Despite her adamant denial, the police couldn't overlook her troubled relationship with Brandon, which had grown evident over time. Gina had never been fond of how he treated Melissa, especially during the wedding when he publicly humiliated her in front of family and friends. Investigators suspected that Gina's anger toward Brandon could have contributed to a motive for violence. Even if she insisted otherwise, her defiance and emotional volatility only heightened their suspicions. "You don't know the whole story," she declared, her frustration evident. She snapped during one particularly tense moment, insisting Brandon was not who he seemed. "He hurt my daughter, and I would do anything to protect her." The intensity of her emotion hinted at deeper conflicts, leaving the investigators even more curious about the truth behind the tumultuous relationship. This admission only intensified the officers' scrutiny of her potential involvement in the case, despite her steadfast claims of innocence. Gina remained a pivotal figure in the investigation, with her complex relationships with both Melissa and Brandon raising further suspicions. Then, on July 1, 2015, the investigation took a dramatic turn. On a sweltering afternoon in Columbus, Ohio, detectives received a tip that would shift the trajectory of the investigation. A wedding guest stepped forward, revealing crucial information about Brandon Whitmer's murder. According to this guest, Brandon had been having an affair with his adopted sister, Chloe Whitmer, for several months leading up to the wedding. This revelation rocked the investigation and added a new layer of complexity. Detectives quickly redirected their attention to Chloe, 26, who had always shared a close bond with Brandon. However, no one had suspected their relationship had crossed such intimate boundaries. The affair had been ongoing throughout Brandon's engagement to Melissa. In the days leading up to the wedding, Chloe began planting seeds of doubt in Brandon's mind, suggesting that Melissa was hiding something significant. Having long harbored suspicions about Melissa's true identity, Chloe used her close relationship with Brandon to investigate further. Chloe's jealousy of Melissa, coupled with her complicated relationship with Brandon, created a toxic dynamic that investigators believed could have played a significant role in the events of the wedding day. Her betrayal went deeper, as she had been using their affair to manipulate and exert control over Brandon. As their relationship intensified, Chloe and Brandon became increasingly possessive of each other. Chloe realized that exposing Melissa's secret could ruin everything. However, she had not foreseen the impact of Brandon's public outburst at the wedding. Her strategy to maintain control over him by withholding information backfired spectacularly when he lost his temper and publicly humiliated Melissa in front of their guests. Detectives began to suspect that this affair was the key to unraveling the complex family dynamics at play. The emotional turmoil stemming from the betrayal and manipulation Brandon felt could have contributed to his explosive behavior during the wedding reception. However, the focus soon shifted to Chloe, who now found herself scrutinized as a possible accomplice or instigator in the events that unfolded that night. This new information, alongside witness testimonies from the wedding, painted a more vivid picture of the tragic events that led to the deadly encounter in the church bathroom. Melissa's humiliation, intensified by the betrayal of Chloe's affair with Brandon, became a pivotal turning point in the investigation. As detectives dug deeper, they shifted their focus to Chloe Whitmore, Brandon's 26-year-old adopted sister, to uncover her potential involvement in the chaotic events of that fateful day. Chloe, a lively bartender known for stirring up drama within the family, suddenly found herself at the center of the investigation due to her affair with Brandon. On July 2, 2015, when detectives brought her in for questioning, she shocked them with a candid confession. As she sat in the interrogation room, her demeanor shifted from carefree to serious, revealing details that could change the course of the investigation. Chloe admitted to having a brief affair with Melissa several months before the wedding. As an adopted daughter from China, she often felt out of place among her predominantly white family. This feeling of being an outsider, combined with her carefree and reckless lifestyle, contributed to her pattern of self-destructive behavior. During her police interview, Chloe opened up about her long-standing battle with alcoholism, a struggle she had kept hidden from most of her family. She acknowledged that her drinking had led to some of her most regrettable choices, including her affairs with both Brandon and Melissa. Chloe recounted how her relationship with Melissa began during a drunken night shortly after Brandon and Melissa started dating, highlighting the chaotic nature of her life during that time. Chloe characterized the relationship as a brief yet intense connection. During this affair, she learned about Melissa's trans identity, as Melissa confided in her about the challenges she faced. Still pre-op and unable to afford gender reassignment surgery, Melissa shared her fears and insecurities with Chloe, deepening their bond during that tumultuous time. Chloe stated that, although she accepted Melissa's trans identity, she recognized the potential danger if Brandon ever learned the truth. This knowledge created a dilemma for her whether to inform Brandon or to remain silent about what she knew. When detectives probed further, Chloe insisted she had no part in Brandon's murder, firmly denying any involvement despite the mounting evidence against her. Chloe emphasized that, although she had shared information with Brandon out of jealousy, she never meant for things to turn violent. While she expressed some regret for her actions, her focus seemed more on the repercussions of her own choices rather than the gravity of the murder. Investigators noted her seemingly indifferent demeanor during the interrogation, which raised further suspicions about her involvement. Chloe appeared more focused on exonerating herself than grieving the loss of her brother. However, her admission about the affair with Melissa provided vital context regarding the intricate relationships that may have led to the tragedy. Her involvement, while indirect, revealed that the dynamics within the Whitmore family were far more complex than the investigators had first understood. On the morning of July 1, 2015, the police finally connected the dots, identifying Melissa Whitmore as the true murderer. After days of delving into the chaotic events surrounding the wedding, detectives concluded that Melissa had killed her husband, Brandon Whitmore, in a moment of rage and humiliation. The evidence had gradually accumulated, but it was Melissa's emotional turmoil following Brandon's harsh public outburst that ultimately solidified their case against her. Brandon's public humiliation of Melissa, where he repeatedly shouted, "My bride's a guy," during the wedding reception, proved to be the breaking point. Witnesses recounted how Melissa had run away in tears after Brandon revealed her trans identity to their friends and family. Investigators soon realized that Melissa, already struggling with the fear of losing her job as a high school basketball coach if her secret got out, ultimately snapped under the weight of Brandon's betrayal. After his shocking outburst, Brandon retreated to the bathroom of the church, where Melissa followed him. What transpired next was a chaotic and emotional confrontation. Investigators believed that Brandon, still seething with anger and possibly intoxicated, threatened to further destroy Melissa's life, igniting a heated argument between them. In a moment of desperation, Melissa reached for a small handgun she had hidden among her belongings. The confrontation escalated quickly, and she shot Brandon multiple times, leaving him to bleed out in the bathroom. Defensive wounds on his body indicated that he had fought back, but the locked bathroom door suggested that Melissa had locked herself inside with him during the struggle. The murder weapon was found hastily discarded in a nearby trash can, with no clear fingerprints to trace it back to her. However, it was Melissa's erratic behavior in the days following the murder that drew the investigators' attention. Friends described her as withdrawn, emotionally shattered, and on the brink of a breakdown. Initially, Melissa attempted to distance herself from the crime, but on July 1st, the police confronted her with the mounting evidence. When officers arrived at her apartment to make the arrest, she appeared resigned to her fate, accepting the reality of her situation. She remained calm and did not resist arrest. While some community members were shocked by the news, others felt it was an inevitable conclusion. The Whitmore family, still grappling with the fallout from the public revelation of their personal secrets, had mixed reactions to Melissa's arrest. Some expressed anger and disappointment, while others felt a sense of relief that the truth was finally coming to light. The incident had torn apart their family, leaving everyone questioning how they had arrived at such a tragic end. Some family members felt a sense of relief, while others struggled to come to terms with the tragedy that had unfolded. In the months following Brandon Whitmore's murder, the courtroom transformed into a stage for the drama surrounding the trial of his wife, Melissa Whitmore Stanislav. The prosecutor, Joe Domes, 42, was recognized for his relentless determination and commanding presence in the courtroom. His reputation for pursuing justice made him a formidable opponent, as he meticulously built the case against Melissa, revealing the layers of complexity behind the murder and the relationships that had contributed to that fateful night. He painted a vivid picture for the jury, arguing that Melissa acted out of rage and humiliation after Brandon publicly exposed her trans identity on their wedding day. Melissa had motive. Adams stated during the trial. She was humiliated in front of friends and family, and that humiliation was compounded by the fear of losing everything she had worked for, including her job as a high school basketball coach. He emphasized that the culmination of Brandon's betrayal and the emotional turmoil it caused led Melissa to a breaking point. Adams further described the chaotic confrontation in the bathroom, detailing how the emotional intensity of the moment, coupled with Brandon's threats to destroy Melissa's life, created a perfect storm that pushed her to commit the unthinkable act. The prosecutor's narrative sought to evoke sympathy from the jury, aiming to frame the events as a tragic consequence of a complex web of relationships and betrayal, ultimately leading to the fateful decision that changed Melissa's life forever. In that instant, she felt her world collapsing around her. The prosecutor displayed evidence from the scene, highlighting the gun discovered in a nearby trash can and Brandon's defensive wounds, which suggested a violent confrontation. The prosecution sought to persuade the jury that Melissa's emotional turmoil played a crucial role in Brandon's death, framing it as a crime of passion. On the defense team was attorney Mirelle Jennings-Sobranco, 36, recognized for her composed demeanor and meticulous strategy. She contended that Melissa was not a murderer, but rather a victim of circumstances that spiraled out of her control. This was a tragic event, driven by profound emotional turmoil, Jennings-Sobranco argued. She emphasized that Melissa had left the reception in tears after Brandon's outburst, illustrating her emotional turmoil. Jennings-Sobranco portrayed Melissa as a woman deeply afraid for her future, one who had never intended to harm her husband. Throughout the trial, Brandon's family occupied the front row, their emotions on full display. Brandon's mother, Linda Whitmore, frequently wiped away tears with tissues, while his sister, Chloe, sat silently, seemingly detached. The atmosphere in the courtroom was heavy with emotion as they grappled with the loss of their beloved Brandon and the tragic events that led to his death. After several days of testimony, the jury deliberated for just over 3 hours before delivering their verdict. The courtroom went quiet as the jury filed back in. Melissa was convicted of second-degree murder, leaving many in the audience stunned, as they had hoped for a lighter sentence due to the emotional complexity of the case. When the judge declared a sentence of 15 years to life in prison, Melissa's expression was one of shock. She remained motionless, tears flowing down her cheeks as her family looked on in anguish. Brandon's relatives experienced a blend of relief and grief, feeling that justice had been achieved while mourning the loss of Brandon and the family they once knew. In the wake of the trial, the lives of Melissa, Gina, and Chloe would never be the same. Melissa Whitmore Stanislav, now serving a 15-year-to-life sentence, began her time at the Ohio Reformatory for Women. In the months after her conviction, the media remained focused on her case, with outlets like the Columbus Dispatch emphasizing her challenges as a transgender woman within the prison system. Melissa, who had never had the means for gender reassignment surgery, confronted the daily struggle of navigating an environment that often conflicted with her identity. Despite her legal team's attempts to secure improved conditions for her, Melissa found herself living in relative isolation. The bright future she had envisioned, filled with love and acceptance, had disintegrated in the most tragic manner. Meanwhile, Gina Stanislav, Melissa's mother, resumed her role as a professor of Tibetan Buddhism at Ohio State University. Originally hailing from San Francisco, Gina was recognized for her scholarly contributions and her commitment to challenging gender and societal norms. She often shared her personal experiences of dressing as a man and forming relationships with gay men, even while married. However, the trial subjected her to intense scrutiny. Authorities had speculated that she might have played a role in Brandon's murder, motivated by a desire to protect her daughter following his public outburst. Although Gina vehemently denied any involvement during her questioning, her complicated relationship with Brandon and her unconventional lifestyle left her under a persistent shadow of suspicion. Gina's academic standing took a hit as some students and colleagues began to question her past and her influence on Melissa's tumultuous life. Meanwhile, Chloe Whitmore, Brandon's sister, revealed during the trial that she struggled with alcoholism and had a brief affair with Melissa, which led her to discover Melissa's transgender identity. This shocking admission created a stir in the courtroom, further complicating an already intricate case. After the trial, Chloe entered a local rehabilitation center to address her alcoholism, embarking on a long and challenging path to recovery. She chose to retreat from the public eye, prioritizing her healing process as she dealt with both her addiction and the profound loss of her brother. As time passed, the tragic events of June 2015 lingered in the minds of all three women, leaving a lasting impact on their lives. Their lives were irrevocably altered by a single moment of violent upheaval and the secrets that surfaced. The murder of Brandon Whitmore highlights the profound anguish that can stem from hidden truths, betrayal, and public shame. It serves as a poignant reminder that even the most joyous occasions can conceal the deepest sorrows.